Good morning and welcome everyone to another episode of DigiChem Dialogues. Thank you for joining us. We are live from New York City for the first time. I'm here with Dan Futter, and Chris is live from Denver. Unfortunately, he couldn't travel to New York because of some family situation. But technology, thanks to technology, we are making it work. So thank you everyone for joining. Today, we are going to discuss about winning in the age of AI and what it means specifically for your commercial operations. We hear a lot of hype about AI. No conversation starts or finishes without the word AI. But we are here to wean out noise from the signals. And I'm joined by the two industry veterans who are playing a significant role in getting the real output from AI in your how you engage customers and find and engage customers. So we're going to talk about how AI is changing the way customers discover and evaluate your products, and what does that mean for you as a chemical company in terms of how you go to market, how you rethink your sales, your digital marketing, your customer engagement, what needs to change, what needs to evolve. And then what role the data play in making the AI actually useful and getting a more reliable, consistent output, and what will separate from companies that turn AI into a growth engine from the companies that remain stuck in the pilots and experimentation. So to help us explore, I am joined by the two outstanding leaders. We have Dan Futter. He's he's a Chief Commercial Officer of Dow, and Chris Musso, Senior Partner at McKinsey and also a lead global chemical practice lead for McKinsey based in Denver. So I will let them introduce first real quick before we dive into the conversation. So Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Jay, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to see both you and Chris again on and a really interesting subject. I was reflecting as you were doing the introduction that you're talking about AI and how much it's going to impact. I would say the world are all still novices, even Chris and I, and we've been working on a lot together and independently, but everyone is still learning. So it's going to be a really interesting session just to hear, what types of things Chris has picked up, yourself and myself, and equally, hopefully from the chat as well, from people who are dialed in.
Right. Thanks. Chris?
Good morning, everyone. Jay, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join this. It's always good to see you, always good to see Dan. Excited to talk about this important topic. It is changing the world faster than we can imagine. And so many of my chemical clients feel like they are being a little bit left behind, or that they're making really incremental moves with it. And this has the potential to really change the way they do commercial. And so excited to talk about that.
Great. Let's get started. So my first question to both of you, so maybe Dan, you can take a first shot. Mm-hmm. What does winning in the AI mean for chemical company? And how is it different from the way chemical companies have done business, especially related to engaging customers so far?
I actually think if I'd put myself in the customer's shoes. I actually don't think that customers' needs are changing. Their preferences aren't changing. They've just got a better tool to try to meet those needs. That's the thing that's really interesting. If you look at how generative search is working in particular, I know we'll spend some time on that today. It is just making easier. And if you look in your own personal life, it's the same thing, right? If you do a search on Claude or you search on ChatGPT, you're basically asking a question the way you would to a friend. You're not trying to guess a tag word, right? You're not trying to surface things based on your best guess at how the SEO engines are working. In this case, you just use the normal language. You're saying, I would like a comparison between this and this, or show me what is the best rated, something or other. And so customers are able to do that with generative search. And so it's making it easier for them. If we make it easier, we'll come back to that. It's making it easier for them to get answers that are a little bit more intuitive, a bit more relatable. So I think that's the key thing, is they're trying to find information. They're trying to narrow down so that they can take some sort of action. And AI is giving them a way better tool for doing that. the responsiveness from our side is what's going to be key. Is how do we continue to enable that behavior, enable the search engines to come up with answers that are really useful for our customers.
Great. Chris?
That's a really good point. Putting yourself in the customer's shoes is always a great place to start. A lot of my customers are clients, right? And as I look at the clients who are doing this well, the ones who are using AI for finding customers and then using AI so that they can create offerings. And when I mean offerings, not necessarily product changes, but changes in the way they talk about the product and in that first discussion that they have. I'm seeing it accelerate growth by 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And, you know, for most of my clients right now, that is a huge number when they've been going through the challenges that our industry's been facing.
Right. Right. So, Chris, McKinsey has pointed to the shift towards AI-assisted discovery in B2B buying. And the article that I read also referred to chemical industry. Also, in chemical industry, also this shift is happening. So what does this mean for chemical businesses, and how should they prepare, those who have not yet?
So the AI-assisted discovery that you're talking about there is discovery of customers by a business. So there's also the piece that Dan talked about where the customer is discovering the business. But when we were talking about it's the business going out and finding the customer. Well, what we're seeing from our very best AI, our very best clients who are using AI for discovery, is they're going out and they're taking 2 layers, right? So the first layer is where they'll go through and use an agentic search tool that will look at all different potential users of their products, and for for our world, it's going to be potential users of their materials. And what they'll do is they will search any marketing material, any academic papers, any patents, and they'll go out and find lots of new users for their products. And we're finding this, it is even customers that have had, or even clients who've had products out there for 60 years, finding tons of new customers when they do this. And that's kind of the first layer. And then the second layer is using AI to be able to generate a value proposition bespoke for an individual customer. So say you're Dow and you've got a really high performance polyethylene. You would think that Dow probably would know every polyethylene customer out there. And frankly, they probably do. But a lot of times their customers will be pushing something and they'll have found a new application for polyethylene. And they'll need certain properties, kind of be talking about it in patents. They'll be talking about it in some of their marketing materials, maybe some conferences. And that may not be known to Dow. And so by using AI, you will have discovered what those customers are talking about. And then you can say, it turns out we have a material that will really fit. And you can go have a very specific conversation with that customer on that topic and be able to drive real value and real growth that way.
Right. Great. So I think, so what does it make chemical product content machine readable? Because now your digital assets, be it your website or customer portal, are being read by machines even before a human being reviews. And that has a lot of implications because humans can do interpretation, can do the inferences. Machines can't. They would purely act based on the data that they see in front of them. So what does it mean? What are the implications for chemical companies to make their products discoverable and readable by the AI chatbots?
Yeah, actually, it's been really interesting seeing how Geo is working in terms of surfacing information from our website, in contrast to the traditional SEO. If you think even where the interaction's happening is different with a search, traditional search, somebody would see a hyperlink, you'd be, somewhere in a list of links and they click down and then they're in your environment and you get a chance, obviously, for them to navigate to the information they like. Of course, with the AI search engines, that's not true. You're in the AI environment. So if I do a search on Claude, I'm looking at what Claude curates to me. And so you're not in the environment of the provider of the information. You have to have something really compelling for them to want to click back through to the original source material. Probably what we've used the most effectively to learn about the impacts that has in terms of how we design our content, the searchable content that we have at Dow, has been to actually build our own or put our own search engine, generative search engine, on the website. So we've done this, first of all, it's not visible to the public world yet because we've been refining the experiences that it creates. But we have a generative search agent now working across the whole of Dow.com. And in the early days when we were doing that, it was fascinating because the first reaction to it was, well, the search engine isn't working. There's no way that information is there. And what we'd find is it was surfacing old information, old white papers, maybe incorrect data, duplicates. And it was finding a really hard job to curate up a simple answer to the questions that we were posing. And what we found out, Jay, was that it's largely because we hadn't written it with, almost that human interaction in mind, that sort of intuitive search in mind. So the big differences for us have been thinking about how, first of all, cleaning up our content, cleaning up the data so that you don't see the duplicates, you don't see the dead ends, you don't see the old information. So really cleaning up the content that we have searchable on Dow.com. And then from that cleaned up content, then changing how we structure it, getting really, really clear about what is the product name. What is it a part of? What family? Is it a polyethylene? Is it a glycol? What is it? What purpose does it serve? And then really getting simple on having simple bullet points that say, what does it do and why do you care? And so it makes it a lot easier for the machine reading and indeed for the humans to find the information they need. None of us are very patient, and the machines aren't either, apparently. So if the information isn't there up front and early, then it doesn't want to go through loads of marketing blurb and loads of brand speak to get down to a punchline at the end of a document, right? It wants the punchline up front and early, and it wants the language presented in really human conversational terms, like without all the fluffiness. And so we found ourselves doing that, making sure our points are up early, making the language in our content more conversational. And this is a journey, by the way. We're not finished with this. And also trying to think about how do you make the media that it's searching more engaging? So combinations of different things, videos with, articles that are combined between us and a client, or us and a supplier, us and a partner. And also the traditional sort of data sheets that we have. We're trying to make it much more engaging and human. And the intent of all that is, whether it's machine searching or it's somebody coming on the website, they're getting a great experience. I think the other thing we've seen a lot of is a lot more information presented more in frequently asked questions type of structure. So again, that really helps the search engines find that type of intuitive question that people are getting, and kind of keep the language simple, no jargon, but making sure that you're using really well-recognized industry terms for things so that search genuinely works.
Wow. But this means that you may have to redo your entire content, because most marketing brochures are designed the way you described earlier, that, you keep the climax for the end. And the AI search engine or AI agent is looking for the punchline upfront.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, with SEO, obviously we were optimizing for something slightly different, but the least it had us try to minimize the amount of redundant content and really refine to the most punchy content that we've got. So we've got a head start and working for a long time on trying to optimize for sort of traditional search engines. But it's still, you are absolutely right, is requiring us to make a major change to improve the experience for the generative search engines as well. But I mean, you've got a balance there. You're trying to make sure it works for those search engines, but also for humans, because most of our traffic, 99% of our traffic is still people searching, right? Yep. Even though the generative search is increasing, it's still people. And so you have to make sure you get the balance right. But actually, most of the things that generative search is demanding of us in terms of content change are also good for how we search, you, me, and Chris, and all the people online for information.
Right. But this also means that, sorry, Chris, you wanted to add something?
No, I'm just fascinated with Dan's points here. Dan, Have you found that your SEO performance has improved as well as you've gotten more clear with your language?
We haven't really seen what I would call like a material change in the SEO performance, Chris, but we're definitely seeing it with geo, and even though the geo is still below sort of a couple of % of the search that we see, mostly sort of typical organic search that we're getting from traditional search engines, that geo search is increasing like 5% every month. So the feedback we're getting from that, I think, is helping us continuously adjust the content. And by the way, if you go on DAO.com, you won't see that AI search engine. We've been just piloting it ourselves internally. It goes live on June the 1st. So we're excited to see what customers make of it when they come into our site. You'll have an AI search prompt available to you to do queries. So, if anybody online tries it out after June 1st, let us know how the experience goes.
Great. So geo is also generative. There is also a term called AEO, the answer engine optimization.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Pretty much, I don't know whether they are exactly the same thing, but I use them as if they're the same thing.
Right.
So, feel free to correct me if they're not.
But in either case, what is important is to bring as much content, structured, accurate content out on the website. This is not enough to put a chatbot on your shared drive, because we have seen a lot of companies, they just put simply a chatbot on their website, and then the data is getting pulled from their
No, I mean, all it's going to do is surface exactly what I said, which is bad information or in a bad way, or it's going to get very clunky at doing it. Now, again, who knows? But from our experience today, my recommendation would be try to work with sort of a generative search agent in your own environment before you go public. Right. See what it provides. And actually, I missed one point, which is, and ask the AI agent to rewrite your content so that it's more findable. And so we're seeing that example as well, where we're surfacing things. It's not very conversational. It's not very tuned to the way we like to see information presented to us. And so we're asking the agent, okay, you surfaced this, how would you improve it? Right. And so that's been really productive as well. So my advice is, not the chat box. All it's going to do is shine a light on all the miseries that you've got that people maybe didn't find before. The real art is get your content really good and then keep it there.
Right. So, Chris, you want to add anything? What are some ways that other companies are optimizing geo or answer engine optimization? Are there any tricks, methods that companies are following? Does it differ for chemicals versus other domains?
I don't think it differs much from chemicals versus other domains, except that you have to remember that chemicals just by nature are highly technical products, right? And so making sure that you get the information beyond just the pure technical piece, but also around safety and some of the other key buying factors is critically important. But, to my eye, Dow is leading the way on this.
Right. Yeah, I haven't heard of many chemical companies experimenting with the geo or AEO. So that is great. We'll wait to see. I'll be the first one. I
hope that's a good head start for us.
On the June 1st. Yes, it is. I think I haven't seen many companies. So even if, the learning is very critical. It takes several experiments before it gets perfect. So
yeah, I might be echoing. It was actually Dow's earnings, Q1 earnings this morning, and our new CEO, Karen S. Carter, was talking about how important sort of digital channels have become for us, and so they are right over the last 5 years. As Chris will know, because we've been in regular contact, talked about this subject a lot. We've been progressively improving how well we perform in search, how well our digital demand generation operates, how much traffic that drives, how many leads that creates for us, opportunities, and ultimately sales for us and our channel partners, our distributors. So it has become from something that was very little 6-7 years ago, something that's a really important growth vehicle for us, as Chris mentioned earlier. And so we don't want to give that up, right? That's a super important channel for us. So anything we can do to double down and make our information more findable, help finances that those customers are looking for, and mean that we're the first place they come to when they want to order, we're going to do it. And so we hold out a lot of enthusiasm for how AI is making it easier for us to connect with customers like that. And I hope to see the same growth trajectory that we've seen with the traditional digital offering that we've had.
Right. And that is what we tell companies that, this is, it's a significant strategic advantage if you create your digital presence in a way that you can attract new customers and find, because you'll be amazed how many customers or prospects journey starts online first.
Right.
They don't, gone are the days when they pick up the phone and talk to the salespeople, your salesperson, particularly when they need it, because they will do the new generation. They will do all the research as much as they can do on their own. And only when they get stuck, they will look for a sales phone number.
Even me, I mean, my kids always laugh at, I'm a little slower than them to pick up new trends digitally, but I do not do traditional search anymore. I'm a shameless advocate for Anthropic. I use Claude all the time. Yeah. And he has made my search experience so much better. My ability to find things so much better. It also makes me much more suspicious of how some people are framing the information so it surfaces at me, so I choose their product. But it is made that sort of, how do I find out about something? How do I choose it? Much easier. And so I think we're going to see that continued dramatic rise in transition of people using generative search rather than traditional.
Right. So my next question, Chris, so large chemical companies, they receive high volume of digital inquiries. And then Dan can throw some number as to how many inquiries Dow receive. So how do you distinguish real buying intent from the noise? Is there any role that AI can play here? Because this has been traditionally one of the big challenge, especially for large public companies where they get so many inquiries that it just becomes meaningless to put any resources towards it. But that is, to me, quite an untapped opportunity. Mm-hmm. And if companies can figure out to win out the signal from the noise and automate some of this could be a pretty good, growth driver.
Oh, for sure. There's a couple different ways that we're seeing people think about it. The first way is kind of what you might imagine, where you're using AI to look through and look for different signals that would say this is a potential buyer. Might be, where is the email originating from? Like if it's from, Ford, from an engineer at Ford, then that might be something you want to follow up on that have real volume. But that's only one of the signals. There's a bunch of different signals. And so we're seeing people use, it's essentially agentic AI to create an algorithm so that they can filter out and say, here are the ones that are worth following up on. The other way to do it, though, is like if you've got someone's email, to actually use agentic AI to do the first 4 or 5 conversations with them. Mm-hmm. And those first 4 or 5 conversations can be really insightful and they can be really valuable. And so say somebody inquires on, a heat dissipation fluid, right? Some glycol-based heat dissipation fluid. And they ask about it and they see something on a website or on Dow's website and ask about it. And then an agent actually could go back to them and say, hey, we saw that you are interested in this fluid. Talk to us about your application. And then you'll start to filter whether they're interested based on, obviously based on the quality of your email response to them. If they feel like it's a robot, it's difficult. But if you do it in a natural language way, they can respond back to you. You can start to understand their application. And we're seeing the best people will go back with like, oh, okay, that is a great application for this material. We've got 2 or 3 different options. And here are the strengths and weaknesses of those options. And then really start to get the conversation going. But I mean, to the point that they could like send a data sheet on the material with the stuff that they want to highlight. Like they will highlight in the data sheet, here are the things that you ought to be thinking about. And then at a natural point in the conversation, when it looks like this is actually a real lead, they'll hand it off in a very natural way again to a sales engineer who can then pick it up and take it. And so that, like doing that, is way different than we would do before, because you don't like, you're not really trying to filter the signal from the noise. You're just trying to have as much contact as you can. And remember, those emails, once you have, a customer's email, that is a proprietary channel then for you, and something that you can follow up with them and help them to, you can develop them over time. And it's by far the most efficient channel we have right now in digital.
Yep. So, Dan,
Chris is spot on. I'm not going to claim that we are in a mature phase on any of this, but I think what Chris has just described is exactly what interests us, and we get, probably as many as 500,000 hits on our website every month, right?
Wow.
And tens of thousands of leads from that, whether those arise organically or because of some campaign we've been running. It's a lot of leads, and so that initial triage is really important that Chris talked about. So we are experimenting with that, trying to get faster analysis of the leads so that we know which ones to follow up on fast. We know which ones would probably be best in the hands of our distributors, because that's already a customer of theirs. And so constantly trying to improve that triage. So again, not mature yet there, but definitely working through that with AI. But I think Chris is right as well, is you can then start to, if you look at the behavior of customers, the ones that we win on those leads are the ones that we respond to the most quickly and obviously the most quality response. And the best will in the world, when you've got tens of thousands to deal with, you're not as fast as you'd like. When you're traveling, you're not as fast as you'd like. And so we're trying to improve that turnaround speed at every interaction with a customer. And so we obviously, we're a big Microsoft house at Dow. And so we use Sales Copilot with CRM to put some of those created answers out there quickly. We're not at the point yet where the machine is managing all of that communication flow, but we have the seller see that response before it goes, modify the response if they want to, and get it out. But at least it's helping them generate responses much faster, and then to read and summarize the responses they get back from the customers much faster, and obviously follow that trail of that history of interaction in CRM. So, but I'm like Chris. I think there's a day where you will go from having your market assessed, at least getting in the right zip code with an AI agent, and that will feed a demand generation campaign, which will be AI generated, and that will then feed a triage process on leads that is AI mediated, and eventually the first few interactions with the customer, likewise, to the point where we then start to roll in the sellers, the tech service people, the marketers, to have the conversations with the customer, and they're really getting down to the detail refinement. We are not there yet. We're having those individual jigsaw pieces starting to be built, but I see a time when we start to connect those up for then obviously a massive increase in the rate at which we can do campaign lead generation.
Right. Yep. Thanks then. We are also putting a lot of effort, a lot of tweaking our algorithms to improve that process. For example, there are telltale signs from a real prospect versus someone just cursorily looking at a product, like how often they visited your product page, where did they come from, what part of the product profile they looked in, did they download any document or not. And we are tweaking the algorithm. The moment there are some of those signal happens, it triggers automated response or alert to the sales team that, hey, this looks like a real prospect, because the algorithm can tell if you're downloading specific document, asking specific question, that's an alert.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is on finding the intent, but then taking it further. So the idea is to take the conversation as deep as you can without first human interaction. Not that we are trying to avoid it, but that gives you an opportunity to learn, unbeknownst to the prospect, that you are learning the behavior or learning the intent as to which product, what applications they are exploring. So
yeah, Jay, you're both hitting on something that's really important, which is that I don't think anybody has really figured out yet. Is like, what is the algorithm at which it makes the most sense for a human to intervene? Like, what time in the sales flow should the human intervene? Because there are points in the sales flow where, if you're going to have an AI solve the problem, it may use an enormous amount of compute. in order to solve that problem. Whereas if a human could do it, it could be really quick. And figuring out when that handoff is so that it's most cost effective in general is an important piece that every workflow has to think about.
Right, right.
It's true. Although, and you mentioned heat dissipation or heat transfer fluids earlier, and Dow, of course, is a major supplier of those, and we love data centers cranking away with AI search. Chris is still right. I think that we probably want to be selective about how much we're sending to AI.
I'm sure Chris
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's no wonder that Dan is using Claude all the time for his searches.
Exactly.
Right. Just
to drive more demand for heat transfer. We love that.
Right. So, Chris, beyond search and lead capture, what part of customer journey are most ready for automation in chemicals, or are they?
The customer journey, I mean, for beyond search and lead capture, I think that the piece that is most ready, that is probably most immature, is the fit of the spec to the application. Material spec to application fit. So there's a bunch of new simulation tools out there and surrogate tools, what we call deep learning surrogates, DLS. And like what a DLS does is it uses a physics-based approximation, and instead of a traditional finite element analysis on an engineering product, a DLS would use an approximation. And where an FEA might do 2 or 3 iterations overnight, a DLS might do 2,000, right? And it's not as accurate, and so you probably still have to do an FEA, but it can bring your candidates way down. And I think there's a huge opportunity on both sides. So both sides of adoption. So whether you are, say we're talking about an engineering thermoplastic, and you could be an airplane company figuring out when you're going to take an engineering thermoplastic, which engineering thermoplastic to use. And you could do DLS with kind of all the constraints around the material. And you could, kind of pre-engineer your part before you run it into FEA, and you can get right down to the candidate parts. And so that is probably the most natural use of DLS that anybody would think of. It's like, of course, the airplane company is going to do it. But what if you were a chemical company that supplied that material, and you had one of your agentic search tools go out and say, look, this material works particularly well on products that have these characteristics. They've got a really thin wall, they've got a long cantilever, and they've got a certain flex, and goes out and finds 50 candidates, and then you curate those candidates, and then you as the material company before you approach the customer, you run a DLS and come up with somewhere between like 5 and 10 different candidate, kind of finished products. You wouldn't make the product, but you'd show them, and you pre-test them, and then you go have the conversation with the airplane company. Think how different that would feel to the airplane company. Our view at McKinsey right now is that the people who do this early, like the early adopters who figure out how to use DLS in the sales process, may approximate winner takes all. Right? Because then if you're an airplane company, you realize the materials company can do this for you, why in the world would you go to anybody else? Right? And that it really starts to change the game. And so to me, that is probably potentially the highest and best use of DLS, and certainly not the way the DLS guys are thinking about it, because they're hardcore engineers who are thinking about how to simplify the engineering process. But the value creatable by getting the right material to the right product might be just tremendous. And so we're really excited about it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, go on. Sorry, Jay.
No, it's not just helping in discovery, but also helping in a grid selection.
Yeah.
Or even giving them guidance, formulation guidance, for example.
I think Chris raises a really critical point about, again, trying to make an experience as humanly positive as possible, right? The way that we think, the way we like to look at things. How do you make things surface in the way that people search? And one of the things I reflect on now, thinking about AI over the last sort of 2 years, has been everywhere I look, I think there's an opportunity. Absolutely everywhere. It is dizzying the amount of things that we could do more effectively for customers using AI. But the one thing that strikes me, and I think it's super critical for everybody listening and for us as well, is none of it works without a great foundation of the data that you have and how that data gets surfaced based on, the application that people are searching for. I mean, we have products sold into multiple different applications. It's got to be curatable in whatever language that customer's using, but the data has to be high integrity. You have to establish credibility and you have to build trust with customers as well. And if your data is not good, you can't do it. So that's why I keep coming back to as a sort of to reduce my dizziness sometimes is, okay, well, if we get that bit right, if we get the core, the master data right, then it starts to open doors for us to choose to do things like Chris just talked about, or that I just talked about earlier with the sort of natural search within our website environment, or a multitude of other opportunities. Is the better our data is, the easier it is to kick off each one of these sort of innovations.
You're hitting the nail on the head, Dan. This is what we have been trying to, tell whoever wants to listen, is that when machines are reading your data, essentially, website is data, it needs to be, you have to think through that machine doesn't understand the context. If you have a technical expert with 25 years of experience, can make inferences even with half the information. But machines cannot do that. So your data doesn't need to be not only be clean and accurate and structured, but also the contextualized. Now, context in the context of AI is becoming a buzzword. But here in chemicals, the chemical data is complex, and like one product can go in a half a dozen different application, and the product attribute has a different interpretation in each. So that is where the contracts, the building the right product data model, bringing the right taxonomies for specific application is extremely critical. And that's where the importance of commercial master data, product master data is extremely important to get your AI outcome more accurate and more reliable. Because the other thing is it's a regulated industry. 90% accuracy doesn't make a cut. No. It got to be accurate 100% all the time. So Chris, do you see the more and more on that on the client projects you are working on? How important is fixing the data?
Yes, and let me hit it on a couple different points. So my PhD was in how to commercialize materials. That was my topic. And what we found was that one of the very biggest issues was in the value chain, because the value chain would say, hey, I need a product that does X, right? They would go to somebody who was making, choose your material, whatever material they were making. They were saying, hey, if your material would just do this, it would be great. And then the materials companies would go make a material that would just do that. And what they didn't understand was that when the customer asked it, what they were really saying is, I need a material that does all the other things that this material does and does this. And there was always a side effect of making the change. And once the material got into the world, everybody realized the side effect was a problem, and so it would stall it for 10 years for adoption. It continues to be a problem, right? Even now, like we have a lot more knowledge, a lot more context and things, but AI actually has the potential to do that contextualization that you're talking about, and to be able to bring it in and say, this material will do what you're talking about, but it also has these drawbacks, right? And be able to push it. And if you think about the fundamental problem that we have with materials, particularly with new materials, it's the time to adoption. It just kills the business case because it takes so long. And so whether it be finding the customer or having the customer find the material, whether it be that initial interaction with the customer, or whether it be this contextualization, everything we're talking about has a potential to compress the time from a decade to 6 months. I mean, it is massive, the potential. And so on the data question specifically, I actually talked with some of our people last night about data, and like how important is it? And they're like, obviously it's critically important, and it has to be structured and it has to be done right. What we're doing right now with agents and squads of agents, where you've got multiple agents checking each other, like an agent manager that manages the other agents and then agents that are checking each other, is we're finding that it's possible to structure the data in 1/50th the time it used to take.
Yeah.
But the trick is that you've got to be able to go back and audit it and make sure that it's correct, to your point, Jay. And I think the next frontier is going to be getting the appropriate contextualization. And that is a piece that we're seeing people work on. I personally don't know that I've seen anybody do it particularly well yet in materials. But it's another one of those things that if you can do it, it'll give you a huge leg up. And my personal view, and you've heard me say this before, both of you have heard me say this before, my personal view is that the large companies who've been around for a long time, who have reams and reams and reams of data from both product testing, product in use, sales calls, R&D, are going to be able to do that contextualization if they can get out of their own way. Like I think they should be able to run away with the AI revolution unless they stall themselves because of, kind of organizational challenges.
Right.
You saw, actually, I don't know if you saw, there was a question in the chat there from Joe Armour on exactly that point. Who's going to win out? Who's got the best advantages, right? Starting point between small and large companies. I think your point is absolutely right. We have enormous amounts of data, right? We have enormous amounts of formulation work that we've done over the years. But is it available and presentable in a form that's impactful for a customer on a journey to develop a new product? Historically, not so much. And so we really do see opportunities with AI agents to unleash all of that data that we had. Our disadvantage is we're not always as fast and agile as a small company. So, and we have this heritage content that we're, as I mentioned earlier, having to filter through. So we just present what is really to the point, and not all the sort of ancillary historic legacy information. So we both have our challenges, but I think you're right, Chris. If we get out of our way in the large companies, with the data heritages that we've got, we should have a good advantage here.
If companies
I think the advantage from the
start...
small guys. Oh, sorry, Jay. The advantage the small guys will have is they'll be able to find customers that they never could find before. If you're an entrant from China and choose your material, whatever it is, and you're trying to get into the North American market, it's a different language, it's a different set of customers. Distributor will probably promise you that they'll be able to find you all the customers, and they will probably make some real progress on it, but they're not going to find them all. And so a small player can get up to speed way faster than they could before. A large player has the opportunity to really differentiate themselves because of the knowledge they have. The ones in between are the ones that have the, kind of the medium-sized players that have the organizational inertia that rivals that of the large players, and don't have the quick up to speed benefit. So that they're the ones that I worry most about in this world, or in the AI world.
Right. But I think big or small company, the companies need to focus on institutionalizing the knowledge they have. And this is where the importance of creating a centralized source of your commercial master data, your product knowledge becomes super critical.
I completely agree.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's already 45 minutes. We are coming towards the end of our session. But
Punchline and some Q&A.
Yeah, maybe one last question to both of you, and then we can take some questions over here. So looking at 3 years ahead, what will separate the chemical companies that scale AI successfully from those who are still stuck in pilots? I mean, a lot of this you have already addressed, but what are the couple of things that audience should remember on this conversation?
Oh, probably from my perspective is, don't get dizzied by it. You have to start somewhere. If you're going to start somewhere, get your core data right, get your master data, get your content right, and then start one by one to fit the extra pieces of the jigsaw. In our case, we have a huge advantage, which is we survey customers regularly. We look at the behavior of customers on their search and buy journeys regularly, and so we have a really good insight into what goes well for them and what not doing so well. And so, our first port of call will be trying to improve the experiences where we're not meeting those customers' needs today. And I think if in our case, if we hold ourselves to that yardstick, it's really effective for us, because it gives us a systematic approach that we already have embedded in the organization of what is that experience like, how can we make it better, how can an agent help make it better for us. And you know, I live by the sort of virtue that if you create great customer experiences, great journeys, finding and ordering products, they'll want to find them more from you and order them more from you. So it doesn't go wrong. So that's our guide is you get your data right and then try to improve step by step on the critical steps of the customer journey.
Great. Chris?
Look, I think it's going to come down to leadership, oddly enough. I think the tools are going to be there, and I think we'll be able to find the use cases, and that will, you know, those will be available. There'll be companies like McKinsey. There'll be a variety of different companies that will have different solutions and the capability to create the solutions to deploy in the chemical companies. But if they don't have the leadership that has the vision to jump on it and the stamina to push through whatever the challenges are, I mean, the challenges Dan was describing, I can only imagine, Dan, how people would say, well, the chatbot didn't get it right first, or the search engine isn't quite right, and so we just need to do this back ourselves. And that may not be the case at Dow, but in every other organization I've seen, there are always naysayers who for a variety of really good reasons, and particularly in a safety critical market or safety critical industry, are going to want to slow adoption. It's going to come down to leadership. I would tell you that I think that the big advantage Dow has had on this, the biggest advantage Dow has had on this, is Dan Futter. Literally, a man who has so much credibility in the organization, so much vision, and so much willingness to push through the challenges, that's what's allowed it to move forward. And I think if companies don't have people like him, they're going to end up behind. I really do.
It's
sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to make you blush, but you haven't been on
having
camera.
read your PhD paper. I did, strangely, when I was working on innovation much more. No, that's very, very kind. I think, I mean, I would like to say an advantage, it's very kind what Chris said, but we have an amazing digital experience team at Dow, and they have been on this journey throughout. So it takes a team to pull something like this
absolutely
off. And it will do going forward, just bigger teams.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, it's not getting cheaper.
No.
I mean, it's making it better, but it's going to be expensive. And that's going to be part of the leadership, is a willingness to spend on what's required to get there.
Right. But also, like Dan said, that it's dizzying to see what is possible, but you got to start somewhere.
You got to start
building the foundation.
That's that guide, right? It's not just dizzying intellectually, it is that. And you constantly feel like you're missing out on, you know, because for every example you come up with, somebody's got one you didn't know about that they've already done and they're getting glory from. And you know what it's like when you're executives in companies. We always pick the one thing that all our employees haven't worked on yet, and we highlight that, which is really irritating, I'm sure, for them. So you're in the middle of that maelstrom of change and introduction, and you always feel like you're slightly behind. And that's why I gave you that reference. If you go think about a way of doing this, you don't have the resources and you don't have the money to do it all at once. So once you've got your data set up, think about the journey from the customer's perspective and start there. Fix the bits that are most productive for them.
Great. All right. We have time for a couple of questions. So the one from, in fact, John Armour has a couple. We'll address at least first one we addressed, small company and big company advantage. Another question from John is, are we seeing chemical companies going beyond AI chatbots and actually embedding AI agents in the workflows to drive more higher productivity or deeper intelligence?
We are.
And if not, what's the timeline to see that?
We are. A lot of experimentation going on there, and it goes much, much broader than simply the things that customers directly see. I mean, if you think about the core skeleton of any company, it is anticipating demand, planning for that demand, manufacturing to that demand, having the inventory to meet that demand, and eventually shipping on time, right? There is nothing like that backbone in a company for driving the most compelling customer experiences, good and bad. And so lots of work in there on those important handoffs. That's a multitude of critical processes that have to line up. So we're obviously looking for a huge amount of data involved.
Right.
I mean, we're shipping a product every 2 seconds worldwide, right? So it's an enormous amount of data for humans to get their heads around. So lots of help in that space. But back to where we were talking about, where I started earlier, the key example to Joe's question has been in having AI help us writing content in a way that AI loves to find it. That's sort of embedded in a one core process is how do we generate content that drives demand, that drives business growth. Chris?
Yeah, I've seen most people. I would tell you that the majority of the AI work so far has been in operations. Actually, we're seeing lots of different chemical companies find ways to use AI within operations to make operations more efficient. And I would tell you that it has been wildly successful and that it's the wrong place to look, personally, right? And so right now, the bottleneck for most chemical companies is not operations. Right now, the bottleneck for most chemical companies is commercial growth. And I continue to believe that the highest and best use of AI is going to be in commercial growth. And so anybody on this call, like, continue on the operations piece. It's solvable, it's doable, and it's incredible. And it's nothing like what you're going to see from commercial as you go forward.
Right. And this is where it's easier to prove the ROI as well, ROI, return on investment as well, with the growth solves most of those problems. We have another question. So like every other tool, the AI is also looks like designed or at least prioritized on English-speaking countries or English-speaking world. Are there customer experiences fully available in other languages? And how long will it take for AI agents to become proficiently multilingual?
That's actually a really interesting question. I mean, when we established DAO.com, I remember at that time it was pre-AI and pre sort of the really competent machine reading and translation capabilities. And so we had to make a choice is that how many languages would we go to what depth in our website? And I think we picked 8 languages initially, the major areas where we saw search activity and where we had business. And we translated, let's say, a couple of layers down into content, but not all content. It is a very, very different world right now. So now we're using machine translation across our website and I don't know how many languages that's up to, but it's up to everywhere pretty much that we cover business. And we're about 2 years, maybe 3 years into that journey now, and we are super happy with the quality of the translation, which has improved dramatically over time. We've had to educate it to do that. And that gives us the ability to surface, pretty much in any language now. So it's going to be an ongoing journey. I'm sure the content's going to improve in those languages, but it has dramatically improved our efficiency and cost to present information in the language of our customers, and accordingly change their experience. So that is eminently doable.
Right. And as a multilingual person, I can vouch to that. I've used AI in multiple languages in my personal life, and it does an amazing job. So last question. So with in chemical industry, the proprietary knowledge about the products, the formulation is extremely critical, and companies are concerned on putting that on the AI, even though those are behind the logins, subscription environment. Still, there is a bit of a trust issue with the Silicon Valley products, that how far you can trust those companies to keep, and you're literally putting some of the most proprietary information in the AI environment. How does companies like Dow get around with that challenge? And what should other companies do?
Well, the challenge is definitely real. There are things that proprietary don't want in the public domain, and there are things that we want available only behind a registration curtain because we want a proper interaction that drives a conversation with a customer. And then there are things that are publicly available. So trying to make sure we understand where those firewalls lie, having the governance and processes and approvals necessary to get those lines drawn at the right point on information is absolutely critical. That hasn't changed much except for the risk of, let's say, somebody in our own organizations bypassing that process. So I would say it's mostly about internal discipline, approval, and setting. Yeah, so that governance is absolutely critical. At the same time, we do want to make sure that we've got as much of our information that's useful to customers in their hands. And then we want to make sure that humans do get involved at some point. I mean, for all the things that we've talked about over the last year, people buy from people ultimately, right. Especially on big ticket, really, really critical products like ours that probably make the difference between your business working or not working if they right. operate well. So in the end, you want to be able to speak to people. And so what we try to do is just constantly work on those, back to those customer journeys. How are those off ramps between things people are doing digitally and things they want to talk to a person about working? Do those off ramps work really intuitively? Both directions, because you will flip between, I need to talk to somebody, I know I can serve myself digitally, I need to talk to somebody. Our reflex is provide as much self-service capability as possible, but provide a great off ramp when somebody wants to really get from that zip code to the front door in terms of the answer they need.
Right.
Actually, the best place I've seen this managed is within McKinsey. Oddly enough, I mean, you think we deal exclusively in knowledge. It's what we do. And we have a completely different environment for internal proprietary knowledge. And it's accessible by members of McKinsey that we can get to. So we have McKinsey.com, which manages the external face of McKinsey. And then we have an internal tool called Lily that is an incredibly powerful, AI-driven tool that basically has access to the entire knowledge base of McKinsey. And that has worked really well for us. And so it goes through a human. Like any knowledge that would emerge from Lily would go through a human before it would ever get to a client or to any type of sharing. And so by doing that, we've got layers of governance within Lily. We've got layers of governance within McKinsey for our people before they can share any kind of knowledge, and that allows us to maintain appropriate firewalls of client proprietary information, McKinsey proprietary information, and any information that can go out. And it works with multiple models, and we've been able to work the firewalls with basically all the large AI models, and you can use any of those within Lily. But it's been a pretty amazing tool that's created real competitive advantage for us.
Great. I think you both touch on two critical points. One is the governance, like how disciplined governance around your data, where you put it, who uses it, in what circumstances. And then second point, which we don't have time to elaborate, but you hit on a very important point, Dan, that AI is not a replacement of what you do, what your sales or marketing team do. It's an augmentation tool that helps them make their job smarter, better, faster. At the end of the day, people buy from people, meaning it's a human interaction. So that is never going to go away. So on that note, it's a great conversation. And thank you very much for both of you for finding valuable time from your busy schedules. And it's been quite insightful. And we look forward to hearing more. I mean, this is a topic we can go on for hours.
Yep. Every year, we'll be back with a new horizon. I agree.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.